The Florida Gators are the 1 seed in the West and SEC champions.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast and Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. And the first thing that we'll talk about is the Florida Gators have won the SEC, and it was just absolutely glorious to watch, right? The Florida Gators beat the Tennessee Volunteers. I didn't introduce myself or anything. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work for New York Giants on SI. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Now, that's out the way. The Florida Gators won the SEC yesterday. And this whole week, which also, by the way, the engagement with Florida Gators basketball fans has been incredible this weekend. It was awesome. Good turnout after the Missouri game, great turnout after the Alabama game, and then yesterday after winning the SEC championship, easily the most viewed basketball episode we've ever had, and the live stream had 200-something people in there at one time, which our most that we ever had in a stream for basketball at one time was like 110. So huge there. Thank you very much for that. But the Florida Gators beat the Tennessee Volunteers in what was one of the messiest games we've seen in a long while, right? There were, in that game, only 17 turnovers combined. Not that bad. But foul-wise, there were 46 foul calls in that game. There were 2 players, both on Tennessee, that fouled out of the game. And there were another 4 players with 4 fouls, 3 of which were on the Florida Gators. It was Walter Clayton, Alex Condon, and Elijah Martin, which I was stunned it wasn't Ruben Chinilu, considering the foul trouble he's been getting in lately. But this was a Florida Gators team that just showed up, right? Simple as that. They came out, took the lead early, built on the lead. Like, again, we'll do the whole breaking it down into quarters thing. First quarter, Florida Gators won it by 3. Second quarter, Florida Gators won it by 6 to be up 9 at the half. And then Florida in the third quarter outscored them by 4 to extend that lead. And then Tennessee won the final 10 minutes, but doesn't really matter because Florida still won the game. Florida won 86-77. Best team in the country, right? We'll talk about March Madness in the second and third segments and the bracket and how clown-like, we'll say, how absolutely clown-like the committee is that set this up, because it was just absolutely ridiculous. But Florida took the lead after it was really, to start the game, Tennessee went up 6-3, right? And then Florida went on I think it was 7-0 run. And then Florida led the entirety of the game after that. Not wire to wire, right? Because wire to wire is, of course, first team to score. You have the lead. Never give it up. It's not how it happened. But even then, Florida built enough of a lead where a Tennessee team that isn't good offensively was just never able to actually come up and step up. Chaz Lanier fouling out definitely hurt Tennessee, but also great job by Will Richard, especially in the first half, to contain Chaz Lanier, because in the first half, before Chaz Lanier fouled and was in foul trouble and sat for most of it, in the first half, Will Richard was just on Chaz Lanier. And for Florida, who switches a lot defensively, they just weren't when it came to Will Richard on Chaz Lanier. Okay? There were some points during the game where Florida frustrated me, and it was the things where they've done it before, and it frustrated me before, and it frustrates me that they do it. Those were the things they were doing where at certain points it was incredibly irritating. Like there was one point in the game where Tennessee's running a transition. Will Richard is on Chaz Lanier, and then, Walter Clayton Jr. is on Chaz Lanier. And then Walt does what Walt does, and I've expressed so many times this irritates me that he does it. But then Walter Clayton Jr. was like, you know what? I'm gonna go play paint defense. And he helps down. And look, I get it, right? If you've ever been on a basketball court, whether you're playing at the park even, or if you're playing actual competitive basketball with organized basketball, if you're, I want to say they were heading toward the corner / wing, and you see someone has an open lane, you want to help down. So I understand that. But if you're covering the best shooter on the team and the best scorer on the team in general, you need to stay on him, right? And Walter Clayton Jr. rotates down like he does so frequently. And I've said this again so many times where I hate it. He does it more than anybody else, where he wants to help down into the paint. And I understand that he can get up there and contest shots and block shots, and he can adjust some shots, but he did it in a time where you can't do it. And that was the incredibly frustrating thing, where he rotates down. Chaz Lanier gets an open 3 in the wing, bangs it. That was Chaz Lanier's only made 3, and it was one of the only times that Will Richard wasn't the guy on him, right? And Florida also had a couple times where, Elijah Martin at one point left the game and got his left shoulder checked out, which he ended up coming back in pretty quickly and playing much of the game after that. But Elijah Martin went out to check his left shoulder, and then while Elijah Martin was getting his left shoulder checked out, someone rolled up on Will Richard, and he ended up being fine. But it was a scary moment there for a second. But for the most part, it's a Florida Gators team where shot distribution was fairly even. Walter Clayton Jr., of course, took the most shots, as he should, but he had 18 shot attempts. Will Richard had 7. Alex Condon had 10. Elijah Martin had 12. Denzel Aberdeen had 5. Thomas Huck had 5. But also one of the things with this team was that they shot better from the free throw line than we've seen basically any other game from them this season. Because not only did they shoot 89%, you could shoot 89% or 90%, whatever, on 9 for 10, but they went 25 for 28 from the line. And that was a big deciding factor, especially when Tennessee shot 25 for 32. Tennessee missed 7 free throws. Florida won by 9. But if Florida had a night like they've typically had, where in any given night, if Florida shoots 28 free throw attempts, they're making 20, right? And that alone, take those 5 points away, and you're winning this game by 4. And then we're talking about fouling late and those free throws and any shot attempts late. So this was a game where Florida shot uncharacteristically well from the free throw line. And this is one of the very few times you can say, hey, that was a deciding factor for you to win the game. You're good shooting from the free throw line. That was it. That was the big deciding factor. Again, this is a game where there were 60 combined free throw attempts. 60 combined free throw attempts, 50 makes. Luckily for Florida, you were the team that made more of those. As in, they both made 25, but Florida shot 4 less. So you made a higher percentage of your free throws. That was a big deciding factor. There was one stretch where Felix Okpara blocked Alex Condon. Alex Condon got the rebound, didn't really pump fake, tried to go right back up and got blocked again. There were some times where it was just messy. Alex Condon has had some moments during the SEC tournament where he had a bit of a mental lapse. Ruben Chinyulus had the same. Walter Clayton Jr. against Missouri had his mental lapses. This is a team where, okay, you've had your mental lapses. Get out of it. You're a senior team. You're a veteran team. You're heading into March Madness as a 1 seed, and we will talk about that when we get back with Locked On Gators. Eating healthy doesn't have to be complicated. With Factor, you get chef-made, dietitian-approved meals that are ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes, so you can fuel your body without the hassle of cooking. Factor meals arrive fresh, never frozen, and with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences each week, you can customize your menu to fit your goals, whether that's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Like I've said before, I carb cycle, so I'll go Protein Plus on days and I lift, Keto on days I don't. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast and use code Factor Podcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code Factor Podcast at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast. Get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box there. Also, if you like to get your supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, which where you should get them, that's Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Join the Trademaster program today for free at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free both in the podcast and on YouTube. And the Florida Gators are a 1 seed, which, I mean, again, I can't stress this enough. The brackets were made a week or so ago, right? That's how they were made a week or so ago, and all they did was change depending on who won conference tournaments. And I say that because Auburn was the number 1 overall seed, and that is you know what crazy that an Auburn team that, and I don't even mean this to be like, oh yeah, Auburn rent-free stuff. It's just an Auburn team that's lost 3 of their last 4 games. One being Texas A&M, sure, on the road. One being Alabama at home in overtime, sure. And then one being to Tennessee in the SEC tournament. Like, I understand the argument or the point that all of Auburn's losses are good losses, right? Because Auburn lost in December against Duke. They lost 84-78, and that was at Duke. Okay? That's not a bad loss. It's the team that probably should have been the number 1 overall seed in Duke. You lost to them, fine. You lost to Florida. That's one of, I'd say that is, I want to say that's their second worst loss. But you lost to Florida in Auburn, and we talked about this with Zach Blackerby of Locked On Auburn the day before the game, where it's like, look, no matter who wins that game, it's not a bad loss. If you're Florida and you go into Auburn, number 1 Auburn, and you lose, that's not a bad loss because it's number 1. And if you're Auburn, if you're going to lose to anybody, especially at home, you'd prefer it be a team like Florida that's incredibly talented, and at the time was like top 10. And so if you're going to lose to those, then so be it. And stuff like that, sure, totally fine. But Florida was a team that went to Auburn and beat you by 9, which the spread in that game was, if I'm not mistaken, Auburn 8.5. Maybe they had a flip, who knows. And then Auburn's worst losses against Texas A&M on the road, March 4th. You went to Texas A&M and you lost 83-72. Okay? Not a pretty way to lose. Not a pretty way to lose there. You lost to Alabama at home in overtime, sure. At the buzzer, sure. But a loss there. You lost to Tennessee in the SEC semifinal. And then Tennessee lost to Florida because Florida won the SEC because Florida is the best team in the best conference. But even with all that of saying, yes, Auburn's losses aren't bad losses, maybe they are the best overall team in the country. They should not have been the 1 seed. Simple as it. Or like the number 1 overall. But at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't truly matter who's the number 1 overall seed. There are 4 1 seeds. Florida is one of them. And we'll look at Florida's side of the bracket right now, where Florida has, they play Norfolk State in the first round, which we'll talk about that in the third segment. Florida plays Norfolk State in the first round of the tournament this Friday. I don't think we have a time for it yet. At the time of recording this, of course. But Florida's a 1 seed facing 16 Norfolk State in the first round of the tournament on Friday. And that's, again, a game where it's like, all right, well, Florida should win that one pretty handedly. I think it was Florida Basketball Hour podcast mentioned that Florida and Norfolk State played once before, and Florida won 84-50, if I'm not mistaken. So you've got that. The winner of that game, again, Florida, most likely, will be facing UConn or Oklahoma as the 8 and 9 seeds. Neither of those games would be incredibly easy. UConn is the 35th best team in the country, according to KenPom. Oklahoma is the 38th best team in the country, according to KenPom. Florida played Oklahoma once before already. And Florida kind of ran away with that game. And that was a game where we talked about, and by we, I do mean myself personally, and the host of Locked On Sooners, where it's just like, all right, well, if a team's going to shoot that lights out from 3, like Florida did against Oklahoma, because that was just one of the most unconscious performances that you will see from any team collectively, you live with that loss, right? Like that's not going to be a bad loss by anyone's measure, any metric, anything like that. So Florida makes they're going to face either Oklahoma or UConn. They beat Norfolk State, which again, they should. We'll see. I know that Florida's, anybody on the planet's going to say that Florida's going to dominate that game, right? I just get a little skeptical with it sometimes because I am a Florida Gators fan and I've been hurt before, and I don't want to be that team, right? Like I don't think anybody wants to be that team. So Florida should handle Norfolk State lightly and then face UConn, Oklahoma. Also in Florida's bracket, the west side is 5th seed Memphis, 12th seed Colorado State, 4th seed Maryland, 13th seed Grand Canyon, 6th seed Missouri, 11th seed Drake, 3 seed Texas Tech, 14 seed UNC Wilmington, 7 seed Kansas, 10 seed Arkansas, 2 seed St. John's, and 15 seed Omaha. One thing about this, so Florida being the 1 seed, St. John's being the 2 seed, automatically they're going to be the 2 teams that you think, okay, they should be the best 2 teams in the conference. They should go on to face each other in the Elite 8. Okay? If that happens, that would be a little bit of a storyline game, we'll call it, because that would be Walter Clayton Jr., who last year was with Florida, but prior to that was with Iona in New York, shout out, was with Iona. And the current head coach at St. John's is Rick Pitino, who was Walter Clayton Jr.'s head coach at Iona. And when Walter Clayton Jr. was deciding between Florida, or when Walter Clayton Jr. entered the portal, he was deciding between Florida and Iona. Florida and St. John's, because he was considering following Rick Pitino from Iona. So saying that'd be fun little, at least again for storyline purposes. But Florida right now, I mean, if you beat Norfolk State, you face UConn, Oklahoma, top 40 teams there. St. John's is the number 11 team on KenPom from the Big East. And you're facing Norfolk State because they won the MEAC, right? They won the very bad MEAC. And Norfolk State, according to KenPom, is the 180th best team in the country. Not a great team, right? They are one of they're the 5th worst team, right? 6th worst team in the tournament. St. Francis is the worst. Albany State is the 2nd worst. Mount St. Mary's is the 3rd worst. American is the 4th worst. SIU Edwardsville is the 5th worst. And Norfolk State is the 6th worst team in the tournament. They've been 24-10. We'll talk more about them in the next segment, but Florida has honestly not an easy. I think Florida might have the hardest bracket in general in the West, right? St. John's, fantastic team. Texas Tech, I think Texas Tech is a really great team. I get it, they're a 3 seed, so they're technically like they're 3rd best team in the conference, but like Texas Tech's a damn good team, I think. They're going to be really fun to watch. And I mean, like Missouri is a great team. We've seen Florida play them. We've seen them beat Florida. I do think that Texas Tech would beat Missouri. I think that game would be a very high scoring game. I do think that Texas Tech would beat Missouri. Texas Tech would be a team that I could see making an Elite Eight run. I'm gonna be honest. I think they could score a ton of points, score punches and bunches, and they could do a lot of damage there. But Florida facing Norfolk State in the first round, we're not gonna overlook anybody. That's not what we do here, Locked On Gators. So we will talk about Norfolk State when we get back with Locked On Gators. March Madness is here. And FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories. Of course, we are not going to be betting on Cinderella stories here with Locked On Gators because we are going to be betting on Florida to win the national championship, because why the hell wouldn't we do that, right? Like, why wouldn't we pick Florida to win it all? Because Florida should win it all. Because Florida, best team in the country. Don't care what anyone says. I understand what you're saying. If you do want to bet on Florida to win the whole shebang, right now, Florida plus 420, the second best odds. If you want to bet on Florida to win the West, minus 110 odds. Pretty good. Visit FanDuel.com and get on the college hoops action all tournament long. FanDuel.com. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free reviews on the podcast and on YouTube. And like I mentioned, Florida playing Norfolk State on Friday in the first round of the tournament. And Florida could dominate this game, right? Norfolk State, not a good, I don't even want to say not a good 3-point shooting team, because they shoot 2 percentage points worse than Florida. Norfolk State shoots 33% from three. Florida shoots 35%. So it's not that they are a horrible shooting team. They don't shoot threes though. They don't. They're big on shooting twos, trying to get to the line. And I mean, they shoot more free throws per game than Florida. And Florida's been a thing all season where I've said, hey, yeah, Florida doesn't get to the line enough. Just not how I view it. I don't think that they do a good enough job getting to the line. But Florida, best offense in the country in terms of adjusted efficiency. I will be looking at Ken Palm a lot this week for it. So Florida offensively, best team in the country, according to Ken Palm's adjusted efficiency. Norfolk State's defense, 217th in the country out of 364. Bad. No other way to put it. Norfolk State doesn't force enough turnovers when they're playing out of conference. In conference, they force about 20%. Out of conference, it's 18.6%. Or sorry, total it's 18.6%, which means heavily inflated because of conference play. Norfolk State allows 33.8% rebound percentage, 336th in the country. Again, 336th in the country. Not good considering, like I mentioned a minute and a half ago, 364 teams. They are a bottom 30 team in allowing offensive rebounds. Florida needs to feast in that area, okay? Alex Condon, Ruben Chinyelu, both should have double-double. Actually, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bet on Ruben Chinyelu to get a double-double. I believe in that one. Yeah, that sounds like a really good one. Norfolk State allows a good percentage of threes, I feel like a lot of teams, like Norfolk State, this is one of the areas where numbers lie, right? And I am a numbers guy, but numbers lie in some areas. And in this one, Norfolk State, they don't allow a ton of 3-pointers attempted per field goal attempt. So basically, opponents against Norfolk State don't shoot a ton of threes compared to how many twos they shoot. But that, to me, is more indicative of how bad Norfolk State is on the glass, because opposing teams get offensive rebounds and then putbacks right there. So that's how I look at it. Like Norfolk State, one of the highest percentages of 2-pointers allowed, 45% of points allowed by Norfolk State, 2-pointers. So that's how I look at that. Where it's like, yeah, sure, you could say that they don't allow a ton of threes, but it's not that they don't allow a ton of threes. It's that they allow a ton of twos. They allow a ton of putbacks. So that's how I look at it, more so than just, oh yeah, they're so great defensively, because they're not. They don't allow opposing teams, or sorry, they do allow opposing teams to get to the free throw line a ton. Florida doesn't. Like Florida, this should be a blowout. This should be a double-digit spread right now. Florida, way more experienced, way better. And I know that if you look at the experience percentages, or the average, then it's closer. Skewed number. Okay. Just want to throw that out there. Skewed number. Florida's larger, almost a full inch taller on average. Norfolk State goes to their bench a ton. Don't think that's going to help them in this case. Like if you're a backup on the MEAC team and you're going up against the SEC, it's not going to be pretty for you. One thing also, Norfolk State almost religiously, and this is one of the reasons their bench minutes is so high, Norfolk State almost religiously, 2 fouls in the first half, you're coming out. And you're not coming back in until the second half. Almost religiously. So I would look, if I'm Florida, I'm going, hey, this is Norfolk State. I'm going to try to get to the line early, and their backups are going to come in, and our team, our starters and our backups should be able to destroy their backups. Don't give them much time in the second half, and then let your starters rest for a bit toward the end of this game. That's how I would look at it, at least. I would say, hey, if I'm Florida, I'm going to play Florida ball. Because, again, Florida, the way that they play offense is like, yeah, we want to take a ton of threes, but if we can get easy twos, we're going to do that. If we can get into the paint, we're going to do that. Florida should be able to get in the paint. I don't think Norfolk State has the athletes or the defensive ability to stick with Florida's offense. Million screens. You're going to have to run around and figure things out. I don't think Norfolk State's going to be able to hang tough with them at all. So Florida should be able to just dominate there. I do think that Norfolk State has a couple of guys that can be big-time shooters, and so that's going to be important to kind of eliminate from them. Most specifically, I do think that Florida needs to actually do their, we'll say, due diligence, I guess, of keeping like Christian Ings not shooting threes, because he's kind of a killer there. But he's also going to be trying to drive and dish. So focusing on that. But I think Florida should be able to dominate this game. This should be, again, like I know the spread's going to be probably 16.5. And Florida should cover that somewhat easily. Like Florida's by large margins the better team. 19.4% of Norfolk State's points come on threes. That is 361st in the country. 4th worst in the country. That's where they are. They're all about the twos. That's why I'm saying just don't let them get hot from 3, and then you'll shoot threes, they'll shoot 2s and 3s more than 2, and so you're going to dominate in that area. So that's where Florida needs to kind of prioritize, but this should be an absolute blowout. Florida should go, all right, well, we're going to play on Sundays, and that's going to be easy. And we'll walk through that and face either UConn or Oklahoma, which I don't know who I'd rather play out of that matchup. Mostly because I look at it from the side of I think it's tough to beat a team twice. I will always say that. Twice in one season. I will always say that. I do think that both those teams are pretty good, but Oklahoma, I think UConn's defense isn't good. Okay. Offensively, UConn turns the ball over quite a bit. And I think Oklahoma is just a team that, again, I don't think that they're good defensively. I think they give up a ton of offensive rebounds, and I think they're really bad at getting offensive rebounds. And I know that people will often overlook offensive rebounds, but it's huge. Like if you're winning the offensive rebounding battle by a large margin, you're getting so many more opportunities to score. That's what it is. That's why offensive rebounding is so heavily prioritized with Florida. It's just you get way more shots. And if you're shooting the ball a lot more, you're probably going to score a lot more. Duh. So Florida should beat Norfolk State handedly and should be able to beat whoever they face from UConn or Oklahoma. but also with UConn, like this is still Dan Hurley, right? He's still going to get his guys ready to play. So it's not going to be easy, but Florida should be able to walk away victorious and should be thought of as like, all right, they're going to be in the Sweet 16. That everybody should look at it like that. Like that's the absolute floor should be that. Should be. We'll talk more about Florida Gators March Madness and Florida Gators football this week because, hey, your team every day. We will be back tomorrow. Talk more Florida Gators football. Talk more Florida Gators basketball. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with New York Giants on SI, and I will see you all next time.